The birth of the two-party system in the United States, the Republican and Democratic parties. The United States is home to one of the world's most defining political landscapes, dominated by two major parties, the Republicans and the Democrats. But how did these powerful institutions come to be? The story of their rise is one filled with fierce debates, shifting alliances, and battles over the future of a young nation. From the earliest days of America's founding to the tumultuous events that shaped the modern political scene. This is the fascinating journey of how the Republican and Democratic parties came to dominate U.S. politics. Let's explore how history forged this two-party system. The early years of American politics. In the years following the Revolutionary War, the U.S. political system was still taking shape. The Founding Fathers did not intend to create political parties. In fact, many of them, including George Washington, actively discouraged the formation of factions. In his famous farewell address in 1796, Washington warned against the dangers of political parties, fearing they would divide the young nation. But despite these warnings, political parties soon emerged. The nation was deeply divided over how much power the federal government should have. This debate led to the formation of the first two political factions, the Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, and the Democratic Republicans, led by Thomas Jefferson. The Federalists versus Democratic Republicans. Federalists. The Federalists wanted a strong central government that could unite the states and manage issues like national defense, trade, and the economy. They were supported mainly by merchants, bankers, and urban elites in the North. The Federalists advocated for a national bank and close ties with Britain. Democratic Republicans. Jefferson's Democratic Republicans, however, favored a smaller federal government and believed that power should remain with the states. They were the party of farmers, rural citizens, and southern states, wary of strong federal institutions. This initial political divide set the stage for the future of American politics, with the Democratic Republicans eventually becoming dominant as the Federalist Party faded after the War of 1812. But even within the Democratic Republican Party, cracks were forming, which would lead to new political movements. The rise of Andrew Jackson and the birth of the Democratic Party. By the 1820s, the Democratic-Republican Party had fractured, and the charismatic Andrew Jackson became the central figure in American politics. Jackson's populist message, championing the common man, marked the beginning of the modern Democratic Party. The election of 1824 was fiercely contested, with Jackson winning the popular vote, but losing the presidency in what his supporters called a corrupt bargain that saw John Quincy Adams chosen by the House of Representatives. This controversy led Jackson's supporters to organize into a new political force, the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party. Officially founded in 1828, the Democratic Party became the party of states' rights, individual liberty, and the expansion of democracy, especially for white men. Jackson's presidency, beginning in 1829, was marked by a focus on populism and westward expansion, often at the expense of Native American lands. The Democratic Party quickly gained control of American politics, but the debate over slavery in the expanding nation would soon create a new political dynamic, the birth of the Republican Party. As the United States grew, the issue of slavery became more contentious, especially as new territories were added. The question of whether these territories would permit slavery led to fierce political battles, and out of this conflict emerged the Republican Party, the Whig Party. Before the Republican Party, the Whig Party was the main opposition to the Democrats. The Whigs, like the Federalists before them, favored modernization, a strong federal government, and economic development. However, they were deeply divided over slavery, and this division caused the party to collapse in the early 1850s. Founding of the Republican Party. In 1854, anti-slavery activists, former Whigs, and members of smaller abolitionist parties united to form the Republican Party. The new party was dedicated to stopping the spread of slavery into new territories. The Republicans quickly gained support in the North, attracting abolitionists, industrialists, and farmers. The Republican Party's rise culminated in the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, a turning point that would shape the course of American history. The Civil War and the Republican victory. The election of 1860, Abraham Lincoln's election in 1860, as the first Republican president, was a direct challenge to the southern states that supported slavery. His victory led to the secession of several southern states, triggering the Civil War. The Civil War, the conflict between the Union, dominated by Republicans, and the Confederacy, composed of Southern Democrats, lasted from 1861 to 1865. The war ended with a Union victory and the abolition of slavery, establishing the Republicans as the dominant political force in the North. This period solidified the Republican Party as the party of abolition and strong federal government, while the Democratic Party retained control of the South. Reconstruction and the Solid South. After the Civil War, the Republican Party led efforts to reconstruct the South and protect the rights of newly freed African Americans. This era, known as Reconstruction, saw the passage of major civil rights legislation, but it also faced significant resistance from Southern Democrats and the rise of white supremacist groups like the Ku Klux Klan. By the late 1870s, Reconstruction ended, and the Democratic Party regained control of the South. For the next several decades, the Solid South was a Democratic stronghold, dominated by segregation and disenfranchisement of black voters. Meanwhile, the Republican Party focused on industrialization and economic growth, gaining strength in the North. The Gilded Age and the Progressive Movement. The late 19th and early 20th centuries were marked by rapid industrialization and economic expansion, known as the Gilded Age. Both parties shifted in response to these changes. The Republican Party. Republicans became the party of big business, industrial growth, and economic modernization. They supported high tariffs to protect American industries and promoted policies that favored wealth and expansion. The Democratic Party. The Democrats continued to dominate in the South, but also began attracting support from laborers, farmers, and immigrants in the North, who were struggling with the rapid changes of the Gilded Age. The rise of the progressive movement in the early 20th century called for reforms to address corruption, improve working conditions, and promote social justice. Both parties contained progressive elements, with figures like Republican Theodore Roosevelt leading reform efforts. The New Deal and realignment. The Great Depression of the 1930s brought about significant political changes, particularly with the election of Franklin D. Roosevelt, a Democrat, in 1932. The New Deal coalition. Roosevelt's New Deal programs, aimed at providing relief, recovery, and reform during the Depression, realigned American politics. The Democratic Party became the party of labor unions, urban workers, and minorities, while Republicans increasingly stood for smaller government and free market policies. This New Deal coalition helped the Democrats dominate U.S. politics for much of the mid-20th century. The Civil Rights Movement and political shifts. The Civil Rights Movement of the 1950s and 1960s once again reshaped the political landscape. Under Presidents John F. Kennedy and Lyndon B. Johnson, the Democratic Party embraced civil rights legislation, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. As the Democratic Party increasingly supported civil rights, many white Southern Democrats, feeling alienated, began shifting to the Republican Party. The Southern Strategy. Republicans, particularly under Richard Nixon, capitalized on this shift by appealing to disaffected Southern voters through a Southern strategy that emphasized states' rights and traditional values. This helped the Republicans gain control of the South, while the Democratic Party became the party of civil rights and social change. The Reagan Revolution and modern conservatism. The election of Ronald Reagan in 1980 marked a conservative shift in American politics. Reagan championed limited government, lower taxes, deregulation, and a strong national defense. His presidency energized the conservative movement and redefined the Republican Party as the party of free markets, traditional values, and strong national defense. The Democratic response. In the 1990s, Democrats under Bill Clinton embraced more centrist policies, balancing traditional Democratic goals with more moderate economic positions. Clinton's presidency was marked by a focus on economic growth and pragmatic governance, as he sought to appeal to a broad range of voters. The modern Republican and Democratic parties. By the 21st century, the Republican and Democratic parties had solidified into distinct political entities. The Republican Party continues to advocate for limited government, free market policies, and conservative social values. The Democratic Party, meanwhile, emphasizes government intervention in areas like healthcare and education while championing civil rights and social issues. Both parties represent different regions and demographics. Republicans are strong in urban, also rural areas and working-class voters, while Democrats tend to draw their votes in urban areas and among minority groups. The rise of the Republican and Democratic parties is a story of evolution, shaped by the events and challenges of each era, from the early debates over the role of government to the seismic shifts brought by war, civil rights, and economic change, these two parties have come to define American politics. As history continues to unfold, their roles may shift once again, but their impact on the nation's political landscape remains undeniable. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to Minute Mysteries.